Don't know what happened, folks. They just abruptly kicked me out. That was very, very weird. Very, very weird. But here I am. Are you all still here? Because I'm still here. Um, it says you're all here, and I still see my old super chats there. So if you're all still here, I'm still here, and there you go. There you go. Yeah. So as I was saying, and I hope that folks are still here, and if it's a new link, can you all make a point of inviting people back, right, and posting the link in the new chat? I don't know what's going on here, but hey, I'm just doing what I've always done. Um, there you go. So post this link, you know, if this is a new video, but if it's not a new video, don't, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what's going on, folks, but I'm still here. I'm still doing the same thing. I'm still talking to you all. So, he was sent to infiltrate the German Workers' Party, and eventually he took it over and formed the Nazi Party. That's where Hitler came from. Hitler was never a communist. Never was Hitler a communist. And he was part of the Freikorps, which were a group of people that had killed communists and murdered communists in the aftermath of World War One. There was a mass uprising in Germany, as I'm sure folks are aware of. And he was involved in putting it down. And so that's Hitler was never a communist. That's a very strange question to ask me. All right. Can a former Trump supporter be a communist? Can a former Trump supporter be a communist? Of course. Of course, a former Trump supporter can be a communist, right? People change their views all the time. And I personally do believe that not every person who voted for Trump did so out of pure malintent. And I don't appreciate that assumption on the part of many leftists, right? There were times during the election where, it was complicated. I never could bring myself to be a Trump supporter, right? The positions on immigration and the rhetoric on immigration, the rhetoric around Muslims, I just could never embrace, right? It was just the opposite of what I believe. When he talked about police brutality, I never could agree with Trump and the way he was, just saying, "Oh, we've lost all respect," and all of this, But when Trump talked about the need to stop wars around the world, I agreed with that. That the fact the government works for rich people, in some ways, there was some of Trump's rhetoric that was better. So it was complicated. Um, there you go. So can a former Trump supporter be a communist? I think a former Trump supporter can change their view, and that this desire to rise up against an elite, this desire to stop seeing wars, in some of what Trump presented early on, there might be, some common ground. Now, certainly no common ground when it comes to issues like immigration, certainly no common ground when it comes to hating and demonizing Muslims and all of that. So certainly no common ground when it comes to issues like police brutality and the way Trump talked about women. But, could there be common ground around wanting to stop the wars? Common ground around wanting to make a better country? Of course, of course. Um, so, folks, I don't know what's going on here. I guess this is the new stream or this is the old stream. I don't know what's happening. I still have, the same numbers and all of that. So I'm just going on. I'm just continuing to go on like I'm going on. I have no idea what's happening. It kicked me out of the app suddenly, and here I am. I see chats now. At first, I wasn't even seeing chats. Um, so, yeah, this is the new stream. There you go. Well, bring people from the old stream, please. Post the link if this is the new stream. I would think this would be all one stream, but I don't know what's going on, folks. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. Hey, Mr. Maupin, says Liam Hicks. All right. Well, we're all still here. It kicked me out of the streaming app, so I just opened it up again, and I don't care, right? I'm just doing the same thing I'm always doing. Like I said, I hope to be on, live as much as I possibly can throughout this whole situation. I don't care. So there you go. What is my position on Donbass? Well, I think the people. Well, first of all, the Minsk agreement needs to be implemented. That's the primary thing, right? Is that there's an agreement that was made regarding those regions, and that needs to be implemented. And that people in those regions have very legitimate concerns about the Kiev government and the way it has treated them. And and they, that's all there is to it. Don't want to say too much more about that. What do you think of the Derg in Ethiopia? Okay, so, right, some people, when you say Derg in Ethiopia, they might sound like, you're speaking another language, Caleb. What in the world is the Derg? You know what I mean? So the Derg, right, was a government that came to power in Ethiopia. In Ethiopia, you had Haile Selassie. Haile Selassie was the emperor of Ethiopia. He was the emperor like in the 1930s, and then Mussolini invaded Ethiopia and toppled Haile Selassie. The fascist invasion. Haile Selassie went into exile and lived in London, and he was in London all through World War II. And then at that point, after World War II, Haile Selassie took the throne once again in Ethiopia. He was leader of Ethiopia. He was a big supporter of the United States and Western capitalism, and he was, this emperor of Ethiopia. So then in 1978, there was a revolution. There was a pro-Soviet socialist faction from the military took power, led by Mengistu, and they created the Derg, which was the socialist government of Ethiopia. And, you know, they did some popular progressive reforms. They redistributed land, for example, that was very progressive. They had a literacy campaign that was very progressive, but they also fought a civil war. I mean, they were fighting a brutal civil war with Eritrea, it's really, complicated and it was an awful situation, but, they did accomplish a lot in terms of land reform. And eventually in the 90s, they were overthrown and toppled. And the government, that's in power now, I think the leaders of Ethiopia now, they actually have a name like People's Revolutionary Democratic Party or something like that. And what I think is quite interesting is that the current leaders of Ethiopia, I think their party originated as an Albania aligned party, as a Hoxhaist party. It's not. It's just a pro-Western capitalist party. But it's really complicated, like Eritrea, right? So Ethiopia, right, was, Haile Selassie. So Eritrea was fighting for independence as an Islamic region. Ethiopia was a Christian empire, Emperor Haile Selassie. So you had Eritrea as an Islamic region fighting for its independence. So originally the Soviet Union and all the socialist countries had been backing Eritrea, in fighting for its independence from Ethiopia. So then, after the Derg came to power, many of the Eritrean resistance folks, they supported the Derg, right? And the Derg had granted them certain autonomy. So then there was a divide. So the folks that were fighting the Derg in Eritrea were actually the Maoists, right? Because the Chinese continued to oppose the Derg, saying the Derg were allies of quote-unquote Soviet social imperialism. And the CIA and the Maoists originally supported, were the folks that eventually won Eritrea. So it's very, very complicated. And those folks that are were like Maoists who were backed by China and the CIA against the Derg are now in power in Eritrea. So it's very, very complicated. And these things tend to get very, very complicated, right? Originally, the United States had supported Ethiopia in crushing Eritrea. Then Ethiopia, the Derg came to power. So the United States was supporting Eritrea, covertly. But now that Ethiopia is no longer led by an anti-imperialist government, it's led by these former Enver Hoxha people that are now just kind of, U.S., pro-Western capitalists who torture people. I actually went to hearings about torture in Ethiopia. A whole lot of torturing going on in Ethiopia by the people that are backed by the United States, currently supported now. You won't ever hear about that because they're a U.S.-aligned regime, but there's a lot of torture going on by the current Ethiopian government. But regardless, right, so now the USA hates Eritrea, and Eritrea is very close to China, and it's a very small government, but people refer to the government of Eritrea as like the North Korea of Africa and stuff like that. They're widely condemned, and I mean when countries have this much poverty, right? When countries have this level of poverty, it's very, very hard to build socialism, right? I mean, for example, there's a socialist country no one ever talks about, right? Laos, right? The Lao People's Republic, Laos. No one ever talks about it, right? They're so poor. They've got almost nothing. And they're trying, and they'd like to get Chinese investment, and they're trying, but it's like, if you take power in a country that is that poor, All you can do is try to raise people out of poverty, and the Derg, they tried to raise people out of poverty, and their land reform was very progressive, and their literacy campaign was very progressive. They were fighting a big, huge, ugly war in which all kinds of people were being killed, and they were facing onslaught from all sides, and eventually they lost power. Did they accomplish good things? Sure. The Lao, People's Republic has accomplished very good things also, and China is working with them. But it's like when you're in that level of poverty, Nepal is a great example, right? I mean, the Communist Party of Nepal. Um, have they done a lot of good things? Sure, but they're nowhere near what China is. They're nowhere near what the Soviet Union accomplished because they're a very, very underdeveloped country with very, very little to begin with. So they're trying to coordinate with other socialist countries, trying to bring in foreign investment. And the same with Eritrea, the same with a lot of these countries that have had socialist revolutions, but with very, very, very little, right? And that's the thing. I mean, we've seen some countries that have had like petro-socialism. They've had oil resources, and they can use oil to build a socialist economy centered around oil. That's what Venezuela has largely done. That's what Libya did under Gaddafi. But I mean, it took China a long time to do what it has done, right? China, it was a long march, right, between 1949 and today, and they applied different methods. In the 50s, China very much maintained a free market kind of system. They controlled it, you know what I mean? But in the 50s, they said, we're a democratic republic, we're a people's democracy. They weren't ready to build socialism yet. They were millionaires all through China in the 1950s. In the 1960s, with the Cultural Revolution, China tried to build an egalitarian, pure socialist society, and in the 70s they were doing that. Well, then in the 80s they adopted socialism with Chinese characteristics, and they've applied different methods to building socialism. As countries are trying to raise their people out of poverty, as the state controls the means of production, they're going to do it in many different ways. That's why in that debate I had with Destiny, uh, you know, it didn't quite work. He's like, well, in a socialist society, what exactly would you nationalize? And it's like it would be different in different situations. The difference between capitalism and socialism is, does the government control the corporations, or do the corporations control the government? In the United States, the corporations control the government. Profits are in command, right? The economy is organized to serve the profits of billionaires and bankers. Under socialism, the state controls the economy and forces it to work in the interest of public good. Now, does it do that with total state ownership? Does it do that with worker cooperatives? Does it do that with a market economy for the most part, with just a very powerful state? Yes, I mean it does it in all of those ways. And that's the difference. And it's not socialism is not it is not absolutely not some blueprint or some model, some one true holy way of doing things. It's breaking out of the irrationality of capitalism and profits in command, and organizing society to serve public good and putting people's interests above profits. It's having a government of action that fights for the people. That's what socialism is. And there are different forms of it, and socialism itself will adjust. Chinese socialism today doesn't look like what Chinese socialism looked like 20 years ago or 30 years ago, right? And that socialism in the United States will adjust based on different conditions, right? That socialism is different in different circumstances. That's just the reality of how it always has been. Sometimes socialism will use a lot of market mechanisms. Sometimes socialism will use not very many of them, right? It's about what is best for the people, what is best for raising productivity. There is no blueprint of socialism, just like there's no blueprint of capitalism, right? France is capitalist, the USA is capitalist, Mexico is capitalist. There are many capitalist countries around the world, but not all of them have the exact same economic system, right? And that's the same with socialism. It's about property relations. Do the means of production function according to profits, number one, or do the means of production function according to what is in the interest of society? Right? That's the difference between capitalism and socialism. End of story. That's all there is to it. And there are different forms of socialism, and there are times where socialism has not worked out very well. There are times when socialism has been very, very successful, right? So it's not as simple as people like to make it. And one of the flaws we see is people like to sit there and go, this country has something wrong with it. There's something I don't agree with in this country, therefore it can't be socialist. We've seen that, right? That's very common. Well, I don't like the fact that in blank blank country blank blank happened, so therefore it's not socialist. Well, you're being silly there, right? I mean, that's just silly, right? Just silly. right? Um, I mean, if you, I mean, it's not about good people and bad people. It's not about moral versus immoral. It's about how is the economy organized. Capitalism is an economy organized to serve profits with private interests working in their own interests to advance their own profits. Socialism is when the economy is organized by the state, and when the state controls the economy in order to, get over the irrationality of the market. And let me add that worker cooperatives, in and of themselves, are not socialism. They can be part of socialism. They should be, in my opinion. I'm a big fan of worker cooperatives. But worker cooperatives naturally work according to the market, right? They're trying to maximize their own revenue. And so, if they're competing with each other, you're still going to have all the problems of profits and command, right? A worker cooperative, right, to maximize its own revenue, could behave irrationally. It could compete with other worker cooperatives. Worker cooperatives in and of themselves are not socialism. Let me emphasize that, right? And I see this error all over the internet. People think worker cooperatives are socialism. Worker cooperatives could be part of socialism, but they, in essence, are not socialism. They are not socialism in essence, right? That worker cooperatives function according to the market. They function according to the market. And if profits are in command, even if those profits are shared, it's still capitalism, right? And people just don't get that. They just don't get it. They just don't get it. I don't know what people are talking about, but there you go. I'm just trying to be real here. Shout out to Madison McAllister. Glad you're with us. Um, there you go. What else is new? I answered about the Derg. I answered about Trump supporters. All right. What else? What else did people ask me about? And hey, if people want more super chats or more questions, I'm just going to keep this going as long as I can. What the hell? Why not? Right? The Catholic Church and rat lines. Yes, I have heard that there's a lot written about the Catholic Church and complicity or alleged complicity with Nazi Germany. And I've heard people contest the specifics about it, but there's no question that the Catholic Church, was not an anti-Nazi organization. No question about it. And now people say they aren't as complicit as some people make it out to be. Other people say they're way more complicit than they made it out to be. There's a lot of debate about how much their behavior was problematic during the Second World War, but it was absolutely the Catholic Church, the way they conducted themselves during World War II. They have a lot of blood on their hands, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. I mean, what more can I say about that? There you go. Now, folks, I'm curious. I'm very, very curious. Why don't you give me a little feedback here? So right now it says there's only 13 of you watching. And I know that that's not the case because I'm watching you in the chat and there's way more than 13 of you. So I have no idea what's going on here. It says 123 people. Okay. And someone else has got 67. I mean, this is crazy. It also still has the same super chat count as I had on the old stream. So I don't know what is going on. This is a wild night. I really hate it when I have to restart the stream, honestly. Now let me ask, am I still in the same stream? Or did I have to start a new stream? Is this still the same stream I was on? Or did I have to start a new one? Is this still the same one? Right? Does it say continued? Or is this still the one? No, no new stream. Very interesting. See, I typed in continued and hit continue. So this is the same link going. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. No, someone's saying it is a new stream. Says continued. Okay. All right. Now I'm confused. So maybe it is for some people and it's not for other people. That's very, very odd. Okay. I don't know what's going on here, folks, but please, let's build a bigger conversation. Folks, I want us to make a goal. Let's make a goal, folks. Let's have a goal that within the next, the next month, we beat 10,000 subscribers. We're very close. We're at 9,200, well over 9,200 subscribers right now. Let's try to beat 10K by the end of this month. Let's do it. Let's do it. So there you go. Let's do it. Now, there's still 12 people watching in the old stream. So I don't know how that works. Am I on two places? So I'm streaming on two locations right now. Is that what's going on? Oh my goodness. Yeah. I don't even know. YouTube, there are two live links on YouTube, and they're both working. Oh, you have two streams running, but only this one is showing you. So what in the world is the other one showing? I mean, this is wild. I don't know what's going on, folks. I mean, YouTube is really screwing up tonight. I saw that they're going to be taking down more videos than usual and all kinds of stuff. I mean, I don't know. Oh my goodness. I don't even know, folks. I don't even know. The other one is just buffering, but this one is actually going. Okay, good. I'm getting the numbers from this one. It says 13 people are watching, and I have $81 in super chats. So I don't know what's going on, folks, but I'm seeing your comments on the new one, and this is wild. This is just wild. Like, okay, well, there you go. Well, folks, like I said, my goal is that in the next month, let's get over 10K, right? Because we want to be over 10K. We want to have more than 10K subscribers. Let's do it. Let's get up to 10K. That'll be fun. Would you debate Vosh? Of course I would. Anytime. If Vosh wants to debate me, I would happily debate Vosh. Can you please talk about the unemployment crisis we are about to face, and what do you think about the virus could cause the end of the capitalist empire of the United States? Well, we're going to face unemployment because, I mean, folks, here's the thing. We're shut down, and we need to be shut down for reasons of public health. But the economy can only take so much of this. We know that. The economy can only take so much of this, right? People are not going to be spending money. Bars and restaurants are closed. I mean, the economy can't take too much of this. People are going to start losing their jobs. Banks are going to fail, right? Joe Biden was on TV last night on the debate trying to reassure everyone you're all going to be taken care of. You're all going to be taken care of. They're trying to manage this. They don't know what they're doing because, I mean, it's a public health necessity that we be shut down, but at the same time, the economy can't take it. The economy can't take it. I mean, the problems of global demand that have been there all along are escalating like crazy because of this. And this is a problem. People are losing their jobs. And what are we going to do? I mean, are they just going to bail out every company? I mean, how are they going to have the economy continue to function amid all of this situation? Right? I mean, there you go. I mean, there's going to be a toll for this. And again, this shows the necessity of a socialist society. This shows the necessity of the state organizing the means of production and controlling them and not having them function according to profits. Um, you know, now someone asked me what kind of Marxist am I? I don't play that game. I'm a scientific socialist. I mean, I'm influenced by Marxism, Leninism. I believe in socialism for the 21st century. I think we should study all the revolutions of the 20th century: Marx, Lenin, Mao, Stalin, Enver Hoxha, Castro, Kim Il Sung. We should study all of them, but we should blindly adhere to none of them. We should learn what they did right. We should learn what they did wrong, and try to develop a socialism that can be uniquely applied to our situation here in the United States. I am a scientific socialist. I am a 21st century socialist, and I realize that the type of socialism that works in China is called socialism with Chinese characteristics, and that the type of socialism that we're going to have in the United States will be socialism with American characteristics. It'll be applied uniquely to our situation. I actually wrote a book, City Builders and Vandals in Our Age. You can get a copy. And I explain, my view on things. I go over the history of the 20th century and what we can learn from it. Someone in the chat said we need a society without crisis, and I agree. We need a society that's rationally organized to serve the people and serve public good, not profits. And in order to do that, we need to get beyond the irrationality of capitalism. And I've written about it, and that none of the existing Marxist groups get this. They're all kind of LARPing. It's weird. I meet people, you know, who are wrong. They don't understand Marxism, but they understand the economy more than Marxists do. You talk to people in Marxist groups, their knowledge of things is pretty simple. It's, how do I explain this, right? Folks, often groups function for reasons other than their stated purpose, right? And if you look at a lot of Marxist groups, they all kind of function for a reason other than their stated purpose, right? Their stated purpose is to establish socialism. None of them are really working toward achieving that goal. They all kind of do something else. I actually made a joke about it. I've told this joke before, but I'm sure a lot of you are newer, and so you won't have heard this joke before. So I'll tell it. Here's the joke. So the joke is that there's a man who has a dream. And in the dream, he hears the voice of God, and he says, Man, you own a law firm, and you must hire a communist to work in your law firm. That's the dream he has. You must hire a communist to work in your law firm. So he awakens from his dream, and he says, All right, I'm going to hire a communist to work in my law firm. So he goes and he finds someone from a communist group, and he hires them, and takes them to his law firm. And he says, All right, he says, I want you to go file the papers. So he comes back at the end of the day, and the papers are not filed. And he says to the person from the communist group, he says, Why didn't you file the papers? And they said, Don't you understand that Donald Trump is the president and that Republicans have control of Congress? Now is not the time to be filing the papers. We need to focus on defeating the Republicans and defeating the ultra-right. Maybe if we can get, a Democratic president and a Democrat in Congress, then maybe at that point we can start to talk about filing the papers. But now we just have to focus on defeating the Republicans. And he says, Oh, God, that is ridiculous. You're fired. So he goes to find somebody from another communist group and says to them, he says, Why not you file the papers? So he hires them. They start filing the papers. At the end of the night, he comes back. The papers are not filed. And he says, What happened? Where are they? And the people aren't there. And then he goes on the street outside and he finds them, and they have the papers he told them to file, and they're selling them on the street. And they're trying to get people to buy the papers. He said, What are you doing? He said, Well, we're selling the papers, right? I mean, and look, I sold 5 of them already, and I got $5, and somebody else gave me their phone number, and we're going to have coffee, and I'm going to tell them even more about the papers. He says, I didn't want you to sell the papers. I told you to file the papers. You're fired. This is ridiculous. So then he goes and finds somebody from another communist group. He says, Okay, the first 2 communist groups, they couldn't file the papers. So maybe you can file the papers, right? So he takes him into the law office. He says, File the papers. Goes away, comes back at the end of the day. The office is empty, but there's a leaflet. It says, Rally in Times Square to file the papers. And he's like, Oh, goodness. And he goes to Times Square, and there they are with signs. And they have all these placards that say, File the papers. And the crowd is chanting, File the papers. File the papers. And somebody gets up and they say, The fight for the Palestinians is the fight to file the papers. And everyone goes, Woo, yay. And another person gets up and they say, The fight for transgender rights is the fight to file the papers. And everyone goes, Woohoo, yay. And then they decide, they start marching, to the end of Times Square, and 2 or 3 people go into a bank and symbolically get arrested. And as the police are dragging them away, everyone chants, File the papers. File the papers. And the guy from the law firm looks at them and he says, What is wrong with you communists? All I need you to do is file the papers. That's all I asked you to do. And one of you, couldn't file the papers and focused on defeating Republicans and getting Democrats elected. Another one of you was just going around selling papers. What is this? And now you're having this crazy rally, which is about filing papers and transgender and Palestine, and people are getting arrested. What is wrong with you communists? Why can't you just file the papers? And so, of course, that person from the third communist group said, How dare you? How dare you compare me to the other people, the other groups? Right? Those other 2 groups you mentioned, those first 2 groups, they just talked about filing papers. We're the ones who actually did something. So there you go. That is my Caleb Maupin joke. I kind of butchered it. It wasn't the best delivery I ever gave, but whatever. But it's totally true, right? You got to file the papers, right? And every communist group ever is doing something other than filing the papers. And it's defeating the ultra-right. It's selling a lot of newspapers. It's, organizing a lot of rallies. And but at the end of the day, what needs to be done is there needs to be an effort to go to people in working class communities and win them to socialism and get them to understand the problem is capitalism and build organizations that take care of people and feed people and care for them. Imagine that in your neighborhood right now, there was a communist organization, right? That you knew in your neighborhood and your apartment complex and your block and your neighborhood who the communist was. And you could call them up and be like, hey, if we there's a shortage of food, who do we call and where do we go? And it was somebody who had the block organized. That's what a communist would be doing. Imagine that every Friday night, every Saturday night in your neighborhood, not blocks away, not at the center of some major city, but in your neighborhood, there was a communist educational class where people would gather and get Marxist education, right? And every just like people go to church on Sunday morning, imagine every Saturday night, Friday night in your neighborhood, there was a group of people who got together and sang Marxist songs and heard Marxist speeches, and then they on their weekends they went out and fed hungry children and volunteered in the neighborhood to make the community a better place. Imagine that every time there was anything going on in your community, like on a local level, whether it was a hospital closing or somebody in the community was going to lose their home, there were these people that you could go to. They were like the community level organizers. That's what communists are, right? That's what the Communist Party USA was in the 1930s. That's what the Black Panthers were in their height. That's what communists are in any other country in the world. That's what they are. They're upstanding citizens. They're people that are loved by their community, trying to make the world a better place. And they're people that care for those who are downtrodden, try to make life a better place in their community, and also educate people and give them ideology, right? That's what communists are. And in the United States, communists are not that. I mean, communists in the United States, when you think of a communist in the United States, you think of something completely different. And we need to get over that. We need to apply socialism to the conditions we're in, right? I've been asking my family, friends, and coworkers if they would like socialist policies without using the S word. Guess what? They all agree. Of course, right? Especially 5-year plans. It's totally true, folks. It is totally, totally true, right? That we need to get beyond the ultra left. We need to get beyond the bohemian middle class left. We need to focus on socialists being those who care for the community and want things to get better and want stability, not chaos. Because capitalism, as we are seeing right now, capitalism is chaos. It's capitalism that's chaos, not socialism. What else is new, folks? What else is new? We can keep going for a little while here. I don't want to go for too long. We need a planned economy. Exactly right. We do, right? Uh, I keep getting asked about the Irishman movie. Well, I talked about it. I did a long review of it a few lives after a while back when it came out. But basically, it was a movie about Jimmy Hoffa, and it was very negative. I thought it was anti-union, but it was also trying to equate Jimmy Hoffa with Trump. Yeah, I didn't particularly care for it, honestly. I mean, it was entertaining, I guess. I mean, it was well made, but it didn't politically. It wasn't particularly helpful. Have you ever watched The Sopranos? No, I haven't. Though I will say I do like some of the music by the group who did the theme song of The Sopranos, the Alabama Three. I like some of their music. They do "Woke Up This Morning," but they also do like a song like about Mao Zedong, and they do "Peace in the Valley," and they're kind of this weird like Marxist Leninist country house gospel techno or something. It's kind of a wild group. They do kind of interesting music, and they did the theme song of The Sopranos. I've never actually watched The Sopranos. I heard there's an episode of The Sopranos where they talk about Howard Zinn. And people say, oh, wow, that shows that the left has gone mainstream because they're talking about Howard Zinn on The Sopranos. But there you go. I've never watched The Sopranos. You know, there you go. Well, I don't watch as much television. I just, my wife loves to watch TV. I just, the way I was brought up, my family was they didn't like me watching television. We had TV. We watched it, but there was kind of this attitude you shouldn't do it. And I don't know. I also, I have difficulty sitting still for TV. Um, Do you think that Operation Earnest Voice extends to YouTube? I don't know what Operation Earnest Voice is. I mean, when people ask me about random things like that, I'm sorry, Mr. Hicks, I don't know what it is. People hear socialist and think Hitler. Well, that's sad because Hitler killed a lot of socialists and he was a big anti-communist. You know, Caleb Maupin is the vanguard of the new communist. Well, whatever. I mean, I'm a guy on YouTube, right? I'm doing the best I can. There you go. Yeah. Um, did you see Parasite? I did see Parasite, actually. I thought it was interesting. And it reflects on class. Definitely reflects on class. And I mean, it's one of those kind of thriller movies, the plot twists and turns. Wow. So now we went from 12 of you to 137 of you. There you go. Shows how weird. And now I went from $86 in super chats to 10. Shows how strange this world is, right? Um, but yeah, no, I saw Parasite and I liked it. I thought it was a well-made movie and it had something to say and it shows, how rich people are out of touch. It shows how desperate people are to survive. I thought it was a good movie. I give it a thumbs up. I liked it. Um, I liked Parasite. Yeah. So Operation Earnest Voice is the U.S. government propaganda effort on social media. Hey from LA, how are things, Caleb? Well, good to see you, Ramiro. I hope you and Ophelia are doing great out there in LA. You guys are great folks, by the way. I can't tell you how much fun I had when I stayed out with you in LA. That was great. And I can't wait to get out to LA again. We're planning to do, I mean, at this point, all plans are up in the air. Like I said, the CPI conference, at this point, we're going to have to reschedule it. The hotel was great. They told me we can get a new date. We just have to wait for things to, see what's going to happen before we call a new date. But but as far as LA, I'm actually hoping, not hoping, but it's in the works that once things kind of clear up, we're going to have not only an East Coast conference to establish the CPI, but we're going to have a West Coast conference to establish the CPI as well. And the West Coast, I mean, there's a lot of great folks on the West Coast. A lot of you are probably watching from the West Coast now. I know Ramiro is, and West Coast is great, and I like it. I love California. I mean, it has a special vibe to it. It's different than New York, and I had a great time out there, and I got to meet like Space Communist. I got to meet, I mean, a lot of you who were watching, I got to meet you. So it was great. And yeah, I mean, I can't wait to get out there again. And some folks want me to do stuff in other parts of the country too. People want me to come to Ohio, right? People want me to come to Missouri. I'd love to go to both of those. I'm from Ohio originally. It's been a long time since I've been back to my home state. I used to go to Missouri. That's where my grandparents were. So there you go. And we need to do this around the country. There's a lot of people around the country. I can't tell you how many emails I get. Emails, text messages, somebody who's like 15 years old. Sorry, I didn't explain Operation Earnest Voice, CI's efforts to influence social media and internet. Last super chat, look it up, please. Um, okay, well, I don't know about that. I'm gonna have to look into the details of this Operation Earnest Voice. I don't want to say anything that's inaccurate about it. But it sounds. I mean, we know that they've been doing stuff like this for the longest time. Why wouldn't they be? I mean, we know at one point it was revealed that I believe the NYPD had their own like social media firm, and they all do this, right? Corporations do this, not just governments. So there you go. There you go. But yeah, and I hope that when this all clears up, we have a great conference out in LA, and that I get to meet a lot of you there. And like I said, as long as this crisis is going on, I'm going to try to do a lot more lives. I'm going to need you all to throw suggestions and super chats and such at me because it's going to be it's not going to be easy to just come up with all kinds of content every day. But I'm going to do the best I can. Can you talk about communism in Hollywood? Well, like that's interesting. I mean, that's a big topic, but I mean, you know, in McCarthyism, there was a big like investigation of communism in Hollywood, and that like during World War II, there were four movies that the House Un-American Activities Committee basically said were communist propaganda, and I've watched two of them, yeah, they're communist movies. There's a movie called Mission to Moscow, 1942, and it's about the Soviet Union and the Moscow trials, and it portrays Stalin as particularly good, and the Moscow trials against Trotskyists, and the Trotskyist conspiracy against the USSR is bad, and it's worth a Marxist kind of film. Mission to Moscow. There was another movie called The North Star, written by Lillian Hellman. It's about Ukrainian villagers fighting off Nazi invaders. That's particularly good as well. But was Hollywood ever communist? No. But not surprisingly, there were a lot of Hollywood writers who were Communist Party, sympathizers and members, right? Dalton Trumbo, very famous. But Hollywood. It's interesting. Hollywood always has kind of incarnated like the two sides of American liberalism. It's socially liberal in that it's about it's pushing it's pushing the bounds of what social conservatism will tolerate. Drug use, sexual content. It's always kind of pushing the limits, right? But at the same time, it's glorifying wealth, and unregulation. Operation Barbarossa and what happened to the wire market once they invaded. Why do I keep getting all these weird World War II questions? The Soviet Union fought to defend itself against the Nazis, and 26 million people died. Soviet people died fighting the Nazi invaders. What do you think of the World Socialist website? Well, they do a great job. They do a very good job. It's very up to date on information. I'll give them that. Of all the socialist, explicitly socialist and Marxist websites out there, it's very up to date and it's very well updated. And on international events, they're very good. They've been on top of Assange. They've been very good at covering the Assange case. No one's on top of the Assange stuff more than the World Socialist website. So, they deserve credit for that. Their analysis, they're Trotskyists. They it was originally the Workers' League of the United States, and then they became the Socialist Equality Party. Not my viewpoint on things, but yeah, I really admire the work that they do as a website. They do good journalism. I actually got to meet David North at one point, who's the editor of it. Friendly fellow, I guess. Uh, you know, their politics are not mine. And I'm sure they would say that. But just like any socialist group in the United States, you know, I mean, I've laid out what I think socialist groups should be doing. No socialist group at this point is doing that. So I don't know how to say that. But, I'm sure there's good people that work with them, just like there's good people in all these groups. I know people in the Communist Party. I know people in the PSL. I know people in the Socialist Workers Party. I know people in the Party of Communists. I know people in all kinds of groups, and I was in a group for a long time, and I really tried. I tried my hardest to make that group work. And, the independent perspective that I've developed, it's not, people think, well, Caleb thinks he's so smart. Caleb thinks he's the smartest guy ever. He don't know shit. Well, here's the thing. My understanding that I currently have is not based on just, whatever. It's based on spending like a decade trying to build one of these communist groups. One of these communist group, it's very well embedded and has, you know, a long history, and it was a decade trying to build a communist group and seeing the flaws of it, and then traveling to the socialist world and meeting with the international communist movement and understanding that American communists, there's something off about them. And then I wrote a book about it, about the synthetic left and the problems and what really needs to be done, and explaining and where socialism is at and what socialism means in the 21st century. Right? I wrote a whole book explaining these problems and what's at the root of it. So, that's really what's going on. And it's not just that I did that. I know there's folks that are students that are in the Students and Youth for a New America group, and that's great. And like I said, I'm trying to launch a think tank, the Center for Political Innovation, that will facilitate conferences and discussions about how we can move forward with socialism. I almost don't think that having a socialist party in the United States really makes sense, because everyone in the United States knows there's only really two parties that matter: the Democrats and the Republicans. Right? That's the reality. No other party in the United States really matters. So when young people in the United States or not young people, when people in the United States that are socialists or communists announce they're forming a communist party or a socialist party or a workers' party, it's like, on some level, just by doing that alone, you're not taken seriously by the working class. You're not, because every worker knows there's only two parties that really matter in the United States. So when you immediately announce, hey, we're forming a new party, it's like, oh, okay, you're one of those, aren't you? It already kind of introduces you. Plus, All right, we know that a vanguard party, in the sense that Lenin wrote about, is not what the Democrats and Republicans are. However, let me emphasize that no communist group in the United States is doing anything near what a vanguard party should be doing, right? And we know that. So these groups to call themselves parties in the Leninist sense is not really legit. And then to average people, if you say, well, we're a party, people look at you like, I remember at one time, I'll never forget this, when I was in Cleveland, somebody called me up and all of that, and I said I was running for office or whatever, and they said, oh, you're going to be in the Democratic primary. I said, well, no, I'm part of the party, and I named the political party I was in. And they said, that's a party? And I said, yeah. And they said, what? Like, they don't and again, these Marxist groups, most of which don't have more than 100 people, and some of them maybe even had 300 or 400 people, but they're not a party, right? They're not a party. They run election campaigns. And, forming a party at this point, a group that calls itself a party, on some level, you almost discredit yourself, right? To form a think tank is more serious, I think, right? I think, honestly, I wouldn't be opposed to having people, to working with people in both the Democratic and Republican parties, and I wouldn't be opposed to, it's at the end of the day, in a one-party state, right? There's plenty of disagreement, there's plenty of factions and all of that, right? So, but everyone just, is in the one party, right? In the United States, there's all kinds of disagreement, and there's all kinds of factions and all kinds of movements, but at the same time, there's two parties. Well, if you're going to engage in electoral activism and running for office, right, and you're going to do so, you have to think about why you're doing it, right? Are you running in order to win, right? Are you running, and that happens, right? I mean, there are communists all in elected governments all over the world, right? Are you running in order to win? Are you running in order to build the movement, right? And that happens a lot too, where, there's a candidate that maybe they won't win, but they kind of represent the movement, right? I mean, the Bernie Sanders campaign is a great example, right? Now, they could win at this point, but, the movement, that's, all the people that really believe in anything good are in the Sanders movement. So, so maybe you're participating that way, right? Or are you running to just educate? A lot of socialist presidential or electoral campaigns are simply educational. It's a way to spread the message of socialism, right? And that's worth doing. There are different ways to participate in elections. World War II was the most transformative event in human history. Redrew the map of Europe, created the UN, created Israel. No, I don't agree with. I do agree with you. It was a very, very big event, no doubt about it. No question about that. And the communists played a very heroic role in the Second World War, and they were talking anti-fascism before anybody was, right? No one ever gives credit for that. All these people want to equate communism and fascism, right? I mean, the role that communists played in the Second World War. There's a reason that after World War II, in France and all kinds of countries across Europe, the Communist Party surged in membership. In Italy, right, communists surged in membership after World War II because they were seen as heroes for their anti-fascist organizing. It's wild. I posted a picture of my grandfather who fought in the Second World War. He was a Navy officer. And it's kind of funny because I grew up always hearing the story of the day that my grandfather was getting his hair cut in the ship. And he was getting his hair cut. They had the buzz and they were buzzing his hair off. And kaboom. Kaboom. Torpedo slammed into the ship. And my grandfather looked right at it. And it didn't go off. A German torpedo. The Germans torpedoed my grandfather's vessel. Kaboom. But for some reason, it didn't explode. And, there you go. And if it had exploded, I would not be here today. My grandfather would not have begat my father, and my father would not have begat me. But what I think is interesting is we know that a lot of communists in Germany who were underground, they were working in factories that made shells and made armaments, and they were sabotaging the armaments from within. So, you know, is it possible that my grandfather was saved? His life was saved by a German communist working in a defense factory or in a military armaments factory. Is that possible? I think it's very possible. It's very possible that a member of the German Communist Party who was underground working in a military armaments factory saved my grandfather's life. Very possible. Very, very possible. So there you go. It's very possible that I would not be here today if it were not for the German Communist Party and its underground operations during World War II. You heard that from me. So there you go. I think it's a wild story. Are you seeing me? Says Rachel Martinez. I am seeing you. I'm seeing a lot of things go by. I'm not seeing everything. Um, Communism could literally be the reason you're alive, says Joe the Red. Liam Hicks. I don't agree with everything you say, Mr. Maupin, but you're pretty astute. Well, thank you, Liam. And I don't, you don't have to agree with everything I say, right? And that's okay. People can disagree with me. I don't like this culture of you disagree with me. Well, f you, go away. I think we need to have a culture where we can engage and joke, but also engage and debate serious issues. I hope that Liam, you'll get a copy of my book, City Builders and Vandals in Our Age, and read my view in full and come to your own conclusion. And I hope that when this crisis abides, you and others will come to the founding conference of the Center for Political Innovation, and we'll kick off an entity that will facilitate legit conversations about socialism all over the country. Because we need to talk about socialism. We really, really need to do it. There you go. Um, yeah. Yeah. Folks, there you go. I mean, I'm thoughts on Dinesh D'Souza. Not a big fan of his. Not a big fan of his. As you can imagine, Dinesh D'Souza drives me up the wall. The man, he says wildly ignorant things, and gets paid a lot of money to do it, and it's wild. And he tries to I mean, Marxists were key in the struggle to abolish slavery. And yet he tries to say that the Democrats are racist because they were the party of Jim Crow, and that because they're Marxists. And it's like he's full of ignorance. He peddles historical ignorance. And I mean, he always goes. I mean, Karl Marx was a supporter of the Republican Party back in the 1860s. People didn't know that, right? But he makes it sound like Marxists are racist because Democrats were the party of Jim Crow. I mean, it's like he's I mean, it's like, and it's also, there's a shallowness to his work. I think that there's people that are like legit right wing, like far right, who would also hate his work. I mean, Hitler was definitely not a Democrat. Hitler was a lot of things, right? He wasn't Trump. Trump is not Hitler, right? But this notion that Hitler was a Democrat. I mean, come on, right? It's like he goes through history like finding bad people and explaining that they were Democrats, finding bad things done by conservatives and explaining that somehow the conservatives who did them are all liberals. It's childish. It's really silly, childish stuff. And he's actually much smarter than that. This is a guy who went to Harvard and all that. He's not dumb. He just really hates his audience and he's hustling them. It's a way to make a buck, right? It's a way to make a buck, right? It's a hustle. And he's a cynical person. And, he's got a wife, Debbie D'Souza, who's Venezuelan and hates her own people, right? She wants sanctions imposed on Venezuela so her own people can't get food. Right now, the USA is preventing Venezuela from getting medicine, right? And so, I mean, she's actively trying to prevent her own people from getting medicine and coronavirus testing material. I mean, Dinesh D'Souza hates his audience and is hustling his audience, right? And rewriting history, and then on top of that, he hates his wife hates her own people. So there you go. I mean, sinister. And it's funny, you look at like old clips of Dinesh D'Souza from the 90s. In the 90s, he was really trying to be like a right-wing intellectual, right? He was actually, you watch some of his speeches from like the 90s. He gave a talk in like the mid 90s about affirmative action that I watched, and it was actually like coherent, and he actually like cited sources and all of that. But if you watch if you watch, anything he's done lately, his movies that screen that these right wing pieces, Hillary's America. This guy is just a hack. I mean, he's a hack, and he doesn't believe what he's saying. So there you go. There you go. Yeah. Oh boy, folks, here we are. We're continuing. We're on the road again. So, anything else that you want me to touch on before I go, folks? Like I said, I pledge to do a lot more of these. I really do. Um, I pledge to do a lot more of these. I would love to debate Dinesh D'Souza. I would love to. I would love to debate Dinesh D'Souza. Let's make that happen. Totally. I would totally do it. I would totally, totally debate Dinesh D'Souza. And no, I wouldn't get the microphone at his events and have it pulled away from me as I made a point. I would actually debate him. Yeah. There you go. You don't have to continue, Mr. Maupin. Well, I want to keep going for a little while. Would you debate Stefan Molyneux? Yeah, I would do that. It would definitely be worth doing. And I saw that he wants to debate communists, so I would debate Stefan Molyneux. Yeah. There you go. Do you think there will be a time where we have AI that will control the planned economy? Well, AI will play a role, I think. There's no doubt, because AI can organize things more effectively than people can in some instances. But obviously, there'd need to be human control. But utilizing AI for mechanisms of economic planning to figure out what was most efficient would be absolutely necessary, and we should use it. Do you watch a lot of YouTube in general? Not as much as some people. I know a lot of people that watch, AI excessively. I mean, they just or watch YouTube all day long. I don't do that, but I try to follow stuff. I try to listen to things and listen to things that are outside of my particular milieu. I don't try to just listen to stuff that's how I see things. I try to listen to things that that are all over the place. So there you go. Um, I always try to do that. Yeah. Would I debate Glenn Beck? Sure, I would love to debate Glenn Beck. Um, yeah. So there you go. All right, folks. I think we're going to wrap it up here. Um, it's been fun, and I wish you all the best. Talk to you soon.